Hi everyone, thank you for coming out on such a windy night. I know it was a bit late notice for this. I was trying to get the hall ready and because we have talk every week. Next week it's bats, still determining the location. The week after it's invertebrates, the week after it's lizards, the week after it is native plants, and still just trying to tee up the person for the weeds, but he should be coming soon. So hopefully you'll come out and join us for all of those, because you'll just be so interested. So I'd like to introduce Tim Lovegrove.
Sorry, Jolana, just to point out that the venue for those subsequent talks is not yet fixed.
Yeah, it's to be determined.
Communicate through the email.
Yeah. And I'm Jolana. Sorry, I'm the project coordinator for the Eastern Bays Songbird Project. Tim Lovegrove, he is the senior regional advisor for biodiversity for the Auckland Council.
No, it was council very good.
Yes, the bird whisperer. So, hey, welcome, bird whisperer.
Yeah, so this is all really very basic stuff, which a lot of you I know might already well know and familiar with. But it's really interesting, though, when you do ask people and scrutinising closely about even the common birds, so much difficulty on the plant, and are totally unfamiliar with the calls themselves, or even the sort of subtleties of different calls between different species and how they might change through the year and so forth, the seasonality of calls. So I'll run through some of that stuff and finish off with a little bit of a bird count 101 at the end on some of the bird count methods, the common ones that we use. There are some quite sophisticated ones, but some of them are simple ones like 500 bird counts and slow walk transients, which are quite fun to do too. So anyway, so who are we? Here we go. I've got a speaker here, so just no, I need to turn it up where you can see here the calls. So everyone, I'm sure, knows what this is, and they're very characteristic chattering calls. You'll hear that speaker? Okay. Yeah, so house sparrow, very familiar bird, of course. Male and female. Male with the black bib, and female with the more somber brown. Now there's going to be a shameless advertisement to national radio because these are pinched from the bird calls that we played.
The house sparrow. Radio New Zealand National.
I couldn't see the ultimate clip to remove the commentary. That's very handy anyway. And sparrows, they belong to the family, the weaver birds, sparrows and weaver birds, sparrows and weavers. And so the African weavers, if you get into African, see these amazing nests hanging from the ends of branches, beautifully woven. Well, sparrow nests work like a heap of hay, just chucked into a tree. It's actually quite well woven together. And it's a dome nest with a side entrance hole, so it's a very cosy little nest actually. A side entrance going to this lovely little thing with a roof on. So quite a neat nest. Now often colonial, so I see a bunch of those up in a tall tree and frequently find them on the ground after a storm because they're blowing out, and the eggs are quite distinctive stone grey with little black freckles, quite unlike a lot of yellow eggs you might see lying around, some more familiar thrushes and blackbirds. So these are the two members of the Curtis genus, the thrush and the blackbird, and there's a lovely line from Robert Brown which nice little mnemonic for how you might remember the thrush. That's the wise thrush. He sings each song twice over, lest you might think and then quickly capture that first fine careless rapture. So just think the thrush repeats itself, and it's very, very obvious when you hear them sing. And in fact, they're in full song now. Go. You see the John. The repetitions. And then once the silence turn the thrush off and like that, again to get the black bird. That's a long, melodious, rich sound with generally no repetition. It's a much richer sound than the thrush. There's not the sense of repetition.
song of the blackbird.
And the really interesting thing about the thrush and the blackbird is they start singing at quite different times. The thrush is the first to start, so in April you'll hear your first song thrushes singing really strongly from quite early in the season, really. But blackies don't start until the end of July, last week of July, almost without fail in Auckland. Around about the 25th of July they start up. And so there it is on that chart there. At the same time, around that same chaffinch starts too, and I think, oh no, you feel the advance of the season, the chaffinch and the blackbirds start singing in the seasons. We've got past the shortest day. And so there's blackie and chaffinch singing at the end of July. And I'm sure you're familiar with them, but some people are confused by them and do confuse the female blackbird with the song thrush. But the song thrush, both male and female, are just heavily speckled. There's no doubt when you see them. When you see them in silhouette a wee way across a paddock or a field, the thrush is very upright. It's in silhouette, and you see it at a distance. Blackbird's more horizontal too, so you can pick them in silhouette even when you can't see those colours. And then later in the season, the young male blackbirds start doing patches of black. They start out looking like a female, and the black plumage comes in as they go through that first moult. And their nests are quite distinctive too, so you probably found the nest of the song thrush beautifully lined with sort of a paper mache almost, sort of clean bowl inside, as the blackbird nest is a much more untidy sort of layer of fine fibres. And the eggs are quite distinct, with the blackbird egg with the fine reddish brown freckles on a bluish green base, and thrush eggs with the black speckles. You often find them on a path or in the garden, and the birds and the chicks hatch the eggs, egg shells and toss out the eggs. So quite distinctive. Now, here's two interesting ones. The pipit and the skylark, and they're two very similar looking birds. And unfortunately, you're unlikely to see a pipit around here. You never know. You do get the old one flying over, sort of traversing the city, but the skylarks are common. Skylarks go over in the Western here as well. Yeah. So that's the really introduced skylark, and the native pipit, which is similar but actually in a different family of birds. To see pipits really around here, somebody asked me, well, we can go see them. Go out to people to realise, you can see them on the sand flats there at the mouth of the Orakei stream, in front of the dunes at Muir, places like that. The other thing is that they're rather fond of gravel, old, rough metal roads in the hill country, and you go up into northern Robin on the metal roads on the roadsides there, so just like that. They're open shape. The other extraordinary thing about pipits is this hugely long hind claw, which is quite distinctive. Something showing up in the photo. The claws are quite different too, so here we go. There's this wonderful piece from Ode to the Skylark. Shelley, hail to thee, blithe spirit, where thou never wert. From heaven or near it pours thy fullest heart, and profuse strains on the higher and still higher from earth thou springest. And of course, they're singing as they hover up high above you. And this continuous warbling song, as the bird flutters on high. So that's a very distinctive sound through the summer.
The skylark. Kaivik.
Even a marinade for it, it's interesting, isn't it? And here we are with the skylark song. Now, the really interesting thing about skylarks is they just totally shut up at the end of summer. And I came across this beautiful quote: "As dumb as a lark in August." It's not Shakespeare. I think it might be Shakespeare. It's not. It's something else. But we'd have to say as dumb as a February lark here, because 6 months out of the trip. As dumb as a lark in August to describe somebody with a quiet. Pretty neat, eh? So there's our song chart again, and just going on to the pivot. This little clip has it's actually a very short little call out. Look at that on the wing. And there was a commentary of Hugh Robertson and...
Hugh Robertson is one of the authors of the Field Guide to the Birds of New Zealand, and we jumped on our bikes and headed out on the hunt for the pekoihoi, the New Zealand pipit, or Anthus novazelandiae. They're a small, sleek brown bird with a long tail that's part of the wagtail group. Well, Hugh, we've ridden probably about 7 or 8 kilometres. We were getting a bit panicky there, but lo and behold, in the middle of the road there was our little bird of prey having a dust bath.
That's right. So this is a pipit, and this is a native bird endemic to New Zealand. Although, when I was sort of growing up as an ornithologist and doing my PhD in England, it was regarded as part of a species called Richard's pipit. And it was quite neat to look in the British bird books and see this Anthus novazelandiae on the British bird list, because for some reason it got described first here in New Zealand, and so we had this bird with a New Zealand name on the British bird list. But in fact, now they've split them off as separate species. So this is now endemic to New Zealand, and it doesn't extend all the way to Europe.
Let's have a go at describing it, because it's a fairly small bird, isn't it?
That's right. So it's around about house sparrow size. But it's quite a sleek bird, probably a bit longer than a house sparrow. Very long tail. It's got little white edges to the tail. Can't really see that while it's on the ground here, but the really distinguishing feature of these birds is they wag their tail up and down. So it's part of a group of birds called the wagtails, pipits and wagtails. And so this is a very distinctive feature. Yeah, the tail wagging is as I say, very distinctive, and really only that species in New Zealand wags its tail up and down like that.
Yeah, so quickly about the pipit. So yeah, if you're out at Muriwai or Bethel or something like that, look out for them. That's around Auckland, anyway, classic pipit, but that's the sort of stuff I seem to prefer. Okay, moving on to these finchy things that people seem to have so much difficulty over. But when it all boils down, it's only 5 species to worry about. So it's not many to tease apart. And so we've got the chaffinch is a quite common garden bird throughout Auckland, as is the goldfinch. Yellowhammer's tends to be a seasonal visitor through the winter. Greenfinch, they're throughout and quite common. Redpoll's the least common one, and that's, again, you can go to the west coast to Muriwai and into scrublands, cold scrublands. Is real redpoll country. If I was to go and find redpolls, that's the first place I've got. You go down south, they're extremely abundant through the South Island. I prefer colder climates, clearness. They're really quite local around Auckland, these cool areas of scrubland. So let's run through some of these guys and just show you some of the features and some of the calls. Here's the chaffinch. Now, remember I mentioned before about the chaffinch song starting the last week of July with blackbird, so that's quite a distinct thing. Suddenly there's finch call in your garden, and that's the chaffinch. It's sort of descending chatter. The chaffinch. Spring will flourish. The two sexes are quite different too, with the coloration. The male quite rufous on the chest with the slaty back, and they've interesting behaviour too. When they finish breeding,
Radio New Zealand National.
They form into these big flocks, these autumn flocks, and one of the old English names for them is bachelor bird, because the flocks are one sex in one flock, and the other sex in the other flock. So they just keep separate from these big flocks, and they flush a big flock of, oh, gosh, they're all males. So that's just a lovely example of this old bachelor bird name that the chaffinch has, that flocking behaviour. Moving on to the greenfinch, so it's a big, stocky, it's like a very robust sparrow, quite a heavy bill, and males have a lovely yellowish green colouring. And I always think of the finches, chaffinches chatter when you see the chaffinch, greenfinches rattle, goldfinches tinkle, and yellowhammers go, get a bit of bread, no cheese, and I'll tell you that later. And redpolls go, so let's listen to some greenfinch. Yeah. There's a rattle. It's a rattling sound. Quite strong. And another sign of spring, I was thinking, in Auckland is, you hear the greenfinches rattle, but they also produce a jeering sound. And they'll almost float down with this curious sort of
The European
floaty flight.
greenfinch.
And they give a
Radio
and
New
they hear the
Zealand
spring.
National.
And it's another sign of the passage of the seasons. When I hear my first jeering greenfinch, the chaffinches and the blackbirds have been going for a wee while, and we're now getting into sort of September and we start hearing the jeering greenfinches. It's another lovely sign of the passage of the seasons. You can see the difference here with the male and female, with the female slightly duller in coloration. Now, goldfinch, these are really common and often in flocks. And if you go down to places like the Firth Thames around the Manukau, where the big beds of Salicornia are growing in the salt marshes, often in the wintertime we get huge flocks of hundreds of goldfinches feeding on the little seeds of the Salicornia. So, they do form enormous flocks through the wintertime, but very common little garden bird around Auckland. And they're small and easy to overlook, but we can get a lovely close view. They're really quite striking with that red and gold and the striking markings on the head. And remember I said chaffinches chatter, greenfinches rattle, goldfinches tinkle. So this is this tinkling call on the goldfinch. Is there somewhere? Here we go. It makes very high pitched little sounds. Yes, quite a distinctive tinkling call. Now moving on to the redpoll. As I said, it's our smallest introduced finch and quite sparse around Auckland, but if you were to find a redpoll, go up to the west coast, Washburn and Euroline, places like that, in the low windswept scrublands and the cooler types of habitats. But in Christchurch, it's unbelievably abundant. So Christchurch and the South Island. So they do prefer those cool places. Quite striking close up. There's lovely some serines on the head and the chest and nail. Place some redpoll. So what's upstairs that is this the background here.
The redpoll. Radio New Zealand National.
And on the last one, the yellowhammer. As I said before, it tends to be a bit seasonal, more a winter visitor. So if you go out into anywhere where there's livestock and during winter, the flocks of yellowhammers hanging around eating the fallen seeds, and they're a very distinctive bird. And I was thinking too of the evocative sort of sound to me of yellowhammers in late summer and the heat of summer. The red, that lasting heat of late summer, to hear a yellowhammer, a little bit of red, cheese up on top of the thistle or something, the fence goes quite low to the ground. And they lay gorgeous eggs. One of the old English names for them is scribbling bark, so it's a lovely red egg with scribbles all over it, quite a distinctive pattern. So let's have a listen to a little bit of bread and no cheese. That's the sound of high summer, it really is.
A yellowhammer.
Now, moving on to, see, those finches were quite easy, weren't they? Blindfold you all and play the cruise. starling and minor, so they're all very familiar, of course. The starling, they get this lovely spangled plumage during the sort of through the winter maybe, then it wears off by the time, around the time they start nesting. So they have this lovely spangled, glossy appearance which they lose. That's all the seasonal thing. And the bill goes quite yellow. Starlings and minors are the same big group of birds as starlings, they're quite close related. But the starling has an amazing song, very complex song.
The song of the starling.
What they heard is there's a sort of tempo of starling sounds, but then they intersperse all these mimic sounds within it, that they copy from other species. Like the kingfisher in there, some of the California quail, and
Radio New Zealand National.
one of my supervisors at university, Peter Jenkins, did some work on starling song, and he had telephones ringing and fire sirens, and they put them through the sonograph, which is the thing that produces those diagrams of what the sounds look like. And you had the man-made sound here as well. And really interesting seeing those sonographs just looking identical to this starling sound that they're mimicking. And mine are, of course, quite different, very raucous, distinctive calls. You're all very familiar with that, sure. Some quite melodious sounds, but also raucous notes too. So it's very, very distinctive sound. Similar, just the typical sound of a suburban street in New Zealand, really.
The Minor. Radio New Zealand National.
Now, moving on to the spotted dove. Now, we've got two species of doves now, and this is the common one you'll see. I haven't got a call, unfortunately, but it's a common one you hear in the mornings around this part of town. There is another one which is starting to move in, the Barbary dove, which is, if you go up to Orakei and drive up the old main road through Orakei, you'll see these white doves just sort of crossing the road. And that's the Barbary dove, which is really well established in Auckland and is expanding. So look out for those, because they have a different coo as well, which I'll play later. Rosella, they're obviously pretty distinctive from the Rosellas, and they have an interesting range of calls too. There's the typical flight calls and chattering.
The Eastern Rosella. Radio New Zealand National.
And they have there's also these powerful whistles which carry for some distance. One of the most often. In Eastern Australia, there's a whole sort of cline of these things. The government of Queensland, and there's the pale-headed rosella, which is a sort of creamy yellow head. And they sort of grade down through these other varieties all the way down through into Victoria, where there's an entirely crimson one. So all closely related species in this large complex. And we've ended up with this one here. The crimson rosella was here. Did you ever see one, Jill, around Wellington? They used to be down on the Hutt Valley apparently, but I think they just about died out. They're entirely crimson, with I think a bit of blue on the wings and a blue cheek. So quite different, but much sort of richer crimson in Eastern Rosella. And our old friend the magpie, called Lara Waddle Doodle, as Dennis Glover so aptly wrote. And Tom and Elizabeth took the farm, the bracken made their bed, and called Lara Waddle Doodle, the magpie said. And so it goes on. It's a great poem. Yeah, and I love magpies, they're great. And in Australia, they belong to this group of currawongs, and magpie, and there's also the magpie large, which has been reported as a straggler. And I do wonder, had they not been introduced, they could well have found their way in naturally would be regarded as a native species. But they've got a lot of attitude in magpies.
Tim, we get a lot of our members asking how can we get rid of them?
Yes, there are traps, lasting traps. Where you put, I think you believe you can catch a bird or put a mirror in it, and then that lures the others in. And they do get a lot of bad press, and there's an interesting study that John Innes did with some of the students down in Waikato, looking at are magpies really as bad as we think they are. And they found that the incidence of magpie predation upon native birds was almost negligible, but it was the introduced predatory mammals that were by far the big problem, not a major problem.
I've seen a group of them trying to take down a falcon.
Yeah, they're pretty tough, and that flocking and communal breeding behaviour they have, they're very strong within those territories. So
I've also seen Tui kick the crap out of a magpie
Yeah.
in their territory. So
Sure.
go native.
Tories have got plenty of attitude.
Yeah, they do.
Now, moving on to some of the natives, some of the more common natives, I'm sort of roughly following, as you'll obviously picked up on, the garden bird survey sheet with the species I'm covering. So it really is those things you're most likely to see around here when you're doing the garden bird surveys. So I'll run through some of those and just listen to some of the calls and give you a few anecdotes about them. Karoo, we're very familiar with, of course. What are the carrier numbers like around here? They're quite a few.
I've had 4 of them, my 600 square metre section at one time, which is a bit unusual, but seasonal. They come for the low pots.
I was thinking around Dingle Dell and Kipper Bush and places like that. Those numbers could be reasonable numbers of carrier.
I don't think they're widespread throughout, but they are in certain places.
When the big bird count, very often you see the flight and movements more than 7 birds. Lots of that sort of as well.
The New Zealand pigeon. Keruru.
And Kaka, are you seeing a few of them now? From time to time, a few turning up.
There was one reported on Rihanna I think last year. It was apparently flew over one of the bird countries.
Yeah, they really are starting to make a comeback, actually. They're amazing up in Hoover Ranges. So many Kaka up there. Up there on Jules coming up there too. Years ago, and you'd walk up the coast and you'd track and you might record the odd one, but other than this morning, there's just constant Kaka activity going the whole time. There must be hundreds of them up there.
But Tim, are they daytime only, or are they daytime and nighttime?
Oh, they're insomniacs, actually.
Are they?
Yeah.
I do get the bird call in my backyard at night, only at night time, which I don't know what it is. And it doesn't, there's nothing else that I know, and yet I've never seen a kaka at my place during the day.
They're so conspicuous, you wouldn't miss them. And have those powerful whistling calls too. The raucous note of them. There's these amazing whistle. So, those are far carrying powerful notes. Sometimes when they really get worked up, you can give those whistles and they'll come down and look at you in the treetops. But at Tawharanui, when we did the mainland island project there and set up the festival fence, when we started in 2004, we just didn't see anything. Now that we just walk into the ecology bush and just constantly cutting woods the whole time, so it really responded well. But there are one or two gaps. You're not seeing them Shakespeare yet. I expect we will see them for too long. And Turu has been well on to them. But they're certainly doing well at Tawharanui and in the numbers. Yeah, pretty scarce in my Tawharanui. Sorry?
Are they getting cheeky at Tawharanui? Because I feel like when there's a lot of them around, they do get quite
They
cheeky.
get pretty bold, yeah. Not quite at that stage yet. And certainly they don't have that sort of human interaction too. For instance, the ones down the line. Complaints. The gardeners there about the damage that kaka did in the gardens.
Well,
Yeah,
so
because
she's
the people
starting to get
feed
that
them.
too. With Oh, the
Yeah.
grapefruit trees?
Yes, they're very destructive. And the gardeners in the regional botanic gardens were just horrified that the can't start to spread out. And so they ended Coral Sanctuary and started growing the trees. Just a bit of a reality check, I suppose. A bit of naturalist coming back into the ecosystem. And Tui and Velvet, now that these people do get confused by the calls of Tui and Velvet. Tui generally, of course, have lots more coughs and wheezes and gurgles, and there's a much more random sort of switching sounds. Velvets do tend to repeat themselves also, and there's a more high proportion of bell-like, pure bell-like notes. The other interesting thing with velvet is these calls are sexually dimorphic. Females have a short song, which is quite distinct when you go to the bush. Oh, it was a female. They're so distinct, they can hear picking up no track. I'll just show you the contrast in those. Yeah, so lots of
The call of the tui.
But the thing to remember though with Tui and Velvet is you have regional dialects. So often it's a case of going to an area and living there for a while and tuning in to the differences between them, because they can be quite distinctly different around, even within quite a short distance. Tui and Tui sound quite different from Tafunui, for instance. So even in a matter of sort of 30, 40 k's, you see these quite big regional dialects, dialectal differences. Now, it's as involved. You do get the old little coughing there sometimes, but more of that sort of melodious chiming sound. And that's a male. You need to listen out for these because elbows are now really colonising Rangitoto most chunky, big time. And we're getting still out. And the first ones are now appearing in Devonport. So even when you keep a bush, we think we're it's a good bushy, attractive velvet trees in the gardens. So yes, keep your ears peeled, your eyes peeled, and listen out for them because they are spilling out now from Rangitoto Mashitaka. And with the pest control that we're now doing on mainland parts of Auckland, like Clark, Devonport Shore, Devonport, we're creating habitat for them. So I'm looking forward to hearing them in Smith's Bush over the next couple of even in my garden. So so nearby already in Devonport and Shelton, it's really quite interesting. So they're moving in. And I mean, you go down to Wellington on Christchurch, the river was right through the urban parts of town. So they certainly handled severely quite actively. Familiar fantail, I was going through the bush with novices learning how to count birds. Listen to the squeaky wheelbarrows. That's the fantails. You can't see them, you hear the squeaky wheelbarrows. It's quite a high-pitched little sound. It's quite distant and it carries a long way for a small bird too. Oh, there's something else in there as well.
The South Island fantail. Pi Waka Waka. Radio New Zealand National.
I was hoping there might be some more squeaky stuff. There's a really sort of squeaky stripe, almost like, as I say, squeaky wheelbarrows. It's just so high pitched and piercing. And that's when you're often doing a 5-minute count and standing there, it might be a fantail totally out of view, 50 metres away. You pick it up straight away. and silvereye. They have a really interesting little song, which is very easily confused with the dunnock. And there's some silvereye. Sort of plaintive sort of sound, and they have the little single notes they get when you have them in the garden feeding and the shrubs and so forth. But then this time the male will get up onto the top of the tallest tree and sing quite strongly, quite a strong song. Sort of plaintive sound. And you compare it with this, which is
The silvereye, the toho.
compare it with this. Now this is a bird which a lot of people are not that familiar with. It's the dunnock. And not that dissimilar from a silvereye. It's brighter and sweeter, and I suppose stronger. They're actually quite a rare bird in town now. They used to be more numerous. And I think as the climate's warm, dunnocks have moved out.
The dunnock.
Red poll.
Radio New Zealand National.
Like red poll, you go to the South Island, dunnocks. Dunnocks are really, it's so common in South Island. It's like those cool climates. And to see a dunnock here, it's the same rule of thumb. Go up to the West Hillsford, dunnocks and the red polls and the pivots. So I like those cooler places. And there's one classic box thorn type. It's probably really pretty tight, thorny habitat they love. They've got a beautiful little nest, and they little blue eggs which are no spots on them. So quite a snippy looking egg, which is very similar to the egg of silver. It's the same. Remember Dick Simpson, who was one of our noted bird people years ago, and the author of the first field guide, along with Bob Feller and Graham Turbot. He used to say, you know your birds if you can see and identify them and can hear and identify them. There's one that a lot of people overlook. Rera, grey warbler. Everyone's very familiar with this very evocative sound of the New Zealand bush. We hear it throughout the year, more so in spring and summer, but it's such a sound of bush when you're walking through the bush. It carries surprisingly well for a tiny bird too, don't you?
The grey warbler. Beetle.
Weigh 4 grams. So actually,
Radio New
these
Zealand
are
National.
lighter than the rifleman, which is often regarded as small things in the bird, but these are lighter by weight in rifle. And they build those beautiful dome nests with the whole entrance inside. And then later in the summer, you'll see the cuckoo chicks being fed by warblers, and there's a very distinctive sound. There's probably cuckoo, the adult cuckoo slot, which is another harbinger. Have you heard your first shining cuckoo yet, Jill? I heard them in the noise this morning, my first ones. Yeah. So this whistling call is all the upswing notes, the downswing notes, very distinctive.
The shining cuckoo. Pipi whāraurua.
Yeah, so in late summer, you see this, and once you tune into these guys have this is a cuckoo chick with a very piercing, sharp little piercing call, and once you tune into that, you find them everywhere. Otherwise, they're really hard to see because they're quite cryptic, move fast, and the busy little warblers are rearing this huge cuckoo chick, which is previously has chucked its the warblers' eggs out of the nest and become the sole occupant and is being fed by the warblers. So they migrate up into the Pacific, mainly up through the Solomon Islands. The interesting thing is with that migration is there's a resident population in New Caledonia which our birds completely overfly. And the New Caledonian ones are resident and they stay all year round. And there's this migrant that's going right over the Solomons and coming right back here to New Zealand. So it's an interesting migration pattern. North Island tomtit, now that's not really one you're going to expect to see around here, but I thought I'd throw it in because we do get the old one turning up in the Toto, and if you do go up to the Waitaris or the Himalayas, you'll certainly see them. They're abundant, very abundant in the Himalayas, especially where we're doing pest control. And in fact, a few years ago, we tried a translocation of tomtits to territory islands, absent from territory, and just a demonstration of their amazing mobility. One of the territory transferees ended up back in its home territory in the US in a few weeks, going across those quite significant sea gaps and perhaps it's stepping stone across the islands of Rangitoto and Mashitapu back into its old territory right from the top of the Hulu Ranges. So amazing how far they can go. So they're on Rangitoto, they're colonising Rangitoto, so it's another species that could spill out into these pest-free suburban areas potentially. Certainly as a visitor anyway, if not breeding. And I've got another really distinctive song, which is very much a feature of the bush we got into the US. So repeat it little trill. Quite neat at the end of the breeding season when the baby tomtits come out of the nest, because they're sexually dimorphic, of course, you can see here. And so are the chicks. As soon as they leave the nest, you can see the male chicks and the female chicks quite distinctly different. And Otari, the kingfisher, not that common in urban areas in the city away from water. So luckily in Auckland, we've got all this histories that penetrate into the suburbs, so good kingfisher country really in those eastern areas. But they do live in the forest as well. And one pattern you tend to see here is during the winter time, forest kingfishers from up in the Manures and Waitakus all go on holiday along the coast. And you'll see more abundant kingfishers along the coast than you don't in the Manures and Houston. These kind of farm kingfishers up there, they're all bailed out and gone down for the winter holiday down on the coast. But, when you think of the prey with intertidal and lake crabs and there's a lot of food down in the marine environment compared with the bush. Distinct sound. There's an upsurge call they give as well, which is quite distinctive. That's that kick is one of the most often used. Rock'em swallow, very common around the city now. It was really interesting in the 1960s watching the process of colonisation when the first swallows arrived. When did you first see the first one? In the 60s. They first arrived from Kaitaia in 1959 and swept south and colonised the whole of New Zealand over the next 10 or 20 years. And I remember seeing my first one in Auckland, would have been around about 1972, I think it was. And so just an example of this natural colonisation process that's going on all the time. And you think of some of our more distinctively native words like fantails and what it is. Actually, quite recent Australian colonists. Fantail is almost indistinguishable from one you see in Toronto Park and City. In the city. And you go right up that East Australian seaboard, and there's a whole group of what we call Garigini warblers, that's the genus Garigini, which is just like a warbler in New Zealand. It's actually a river somewhere there, and they're in North Queensland. And so they're very, very similar birds. So they haven't been here that long. And here's the other dove I was telling you about. This is the barb reaper. So I'll put some calls of that. And you can remember what your swallow does sound like lying in bed in the morning, chasing the jolly ones who wake and right.
Dove.
And of course, the coloration
Radio New Zealand National.
And some of the common bigger things, two gulls, getting distinctive obviously. We're doing some interesting work lately down at West Haven. We've got a big red-billed gull colony there, around about 600 metres. And as it turns out, it's now the biggest colony in the Harrogate Gulf. We used to have an enormous red-billed gull colony on Orakei, 6,000 pairs. In the last count, just last year, 55 pairs. And they used to stream out from the islands to the boil-ups where the trevally schools were bringing up krill to the surface, and they were bringing the krill back to the nest to feed the chicks. And the same boats have gone through and cleaned up all the trevally schools and just removed the boil-ups, but just nowhere near as abundant as it used to be. And there's, there's that canary in the coal mine telling us how well they're managing our fisheries. So these inner Gulf colonies, as a result, become much more important. There's one on Ontario around about 300 pairs, another one down at Port Island, and this one in West Haven. And they became a point of interest recently because the America's Cup bases are occupying this area down by the Viaduct Basin there, and they had to move the Seawood ferry terminal around to the West Haven side. The Seawood ferry to the Barrier Way to back from town. It's in a different place. It's around the West Haven side. And in 1994, the old Percy Voss boatyard closed down, and the old slipways and ancillary sort of facilities around the old boatyard just sort of fell into disrepair and became a little backwater, and the gulls moved and started breeding there. And the colony built up to what it is now, around 600 pairs. And we had to dream up how we're going to move these gulls because the site for the new Seawood ferry terminal was the old Percy Voss boatyard. And so the Panuku section of the council provided a bit of land a bit further along the coast. We got Sean Lee to put some beautiful 3D printed wind gulls to pop things out on this new site, and the whole colony's moved to the new place. And last year, there were 600 pairs on this new site, about 200 metres away from the previous one. So it was quite interesting how we manipulate the location of the colony with a bit of fooling them with the decoys. They're of course quite distinctive. We've obviously heard familiar with those. But it's really interesting actually when you compare, say, the red-billed gull. Let's go back to the stirring plover. How similar those calls are. Quite a similar timbre to those sort of stirring plover calls. You could, if you didn't see the bird, possibly confuse them. Let's go back to the poop. Now, I was just wondering that curious call you hear at night, you mentioned. Let's play. The right call, a range of different things that it is. It's the screen there. There's also a flight call you hear at night. They do a lot of flying at night over the sea, and they cover a lot of ground actually. Yeah,
The Phuket call.
that one.
Radio New Zealand National.
Is that the call?
Actually, the call you played earlier, which is the tui, is closest to it.
Okay.
And it's like a decaying sound, and it's more like, in my mind, it's like the noise that a parrot makes. But the tuis in my garden don't make that noise during the day.
Yeah, they
it's
do
solely a
produce
nighttime noise.
We had a clip sent to us the other day actually from somebody in Tiburon, this weird call, and I just didn't get it was. So I sent it up to Kevin Parker, who helps me with bird counts and is familiar with Australian bird. I said to Kevin, I think you should send this to Rohan Clark over in Australia. It's just written this amazing guy. In Australia, I asked Rohan if it's a weird Aussie honey to its tune up in New Zealand, but he couldn't identify it too. He said, I reckon it's probably an aberrant tui, is the Australian guy Rohan Clark. So yeah, they can produce a range of really weird sounds which can really fool you at times. And just finishing off with a bit of bird count stuff. So the 5-minute technique that we use widely, and some of you may have already participated in. So you stand at a point in the forest and you're counting out usually 100, we use 100 metres or over the thumb, but there are different methods where you count out to 200 metres, some to an infinite distance. But we've bounded our ones to 100 metres. So standing there, you're basically looking at foot and feel out around you. Everything's seen bird and the cylinder of air. So you intercept and count those things you're flying over during the 5-minute count. So you're standing there, noting out everything you see and hear over that 5-minute period. And then you walk along to the next point, and because they're 100 metres wide, so if they're 200 metres spacings, you get this effect with each 5-minute count along, say, a track. And you get this sample from the forest with your 5-minute counts. And it was a method that was developed in the 1970s by Peter Bull and Dave Dawson, the old DSLR. And they were surveying West Coast forests at the time when there was this big logging, beach forest logging project going on, chipping beach, and so they wanted to work out what the composition of the wildlife was and then compare it with areas of unlogged forest and so forth. So they developed this rapid survey technique essentially. And the beauty of a 5-minute count is you can walk along a track like this, for instance, stop every 200 metres for 5 minutes and get multiple samples in actually quite a short time. So when we do these counts in the Waitaki, for instance, we've got 9 tracks on which each track has 15 sites. And you can count the whole lot in a couple of hours and go home. And when we sampled our 9 tracks over the summer, we get 135 counts out. It's 135 separate sampling points. So statistically, it's more robust than, say, just doing a smaller number of sites, but multiple counts. So if you had just a little subsample of sites, let's say we had 3 sites and count those 10 times each, statistically that would be far more robust than that because it's a bigger sample. So it's a really good technique for that. But the other method we have, which is the slow walk transect. This is where you walk through the bush and sample out 10 metres each side of your route. And everything's seen and heard, same with the column of air above you. And if it's a set distance, of course, say 500 metres, 10 metres on each side, you've just sampled a hectare of forest when you walk 500 metres, counting out 10 metres each side. So it's quite a nice little rule of thumb way of getting bird densities in the forest area. But the thing to remember with all bird counts is they are an approximation. And the key thing is doing enough of them for long enough to actually start seeing what's going on. And that's the key thing doing. Say around here, if you were to set up a 5-minute bird count program, I'd recommend a minimum of 30 sites. And you could sample both forest and urban settings, or a mixture of some of the extreme edges and so on. You want to have an absolute minimum of 30 sites. But with 30 sites, you probably count 4 or 5 times each, and that could be a sample for spring, summer. So 30 times 4 counts, so 120 odd counts for the season. That would be quite a nice sample to give you some really interesting trends long term. And we've been doing a series of counts in the Waitaki's now since 1997. And we've seen some really interesting things happening there. And this was prompted by a big possum bust that the ARC did in 1997-98. They called Operation Forest Save. The goal was to really knock the possums for 6 right across the Waitaki ranges because they were causing significant damage. And so the possums were taken from a residual trap catch rate of 25%, so 100 traps, 25 traps of possums, down to a trap catch rate of 26%. So really low numbers right through the whole of it. In 1997-98, it's really interesting seeing how these bird proportions change, and this is where it's so important to know what your introduced birds and bird components and be able to identify introduced birds because they tell you stuff that you otherwise may miss. So here in the Waitaki's, for instance, here's blackbird in 97. Look, it's dropped right down, further down the scale of order of abundance. Silvereye, interestingly, and it has a story in here too, because I mentioned before the recent arrivals from Australia. They're more bulletproof, they can handle introduced predators. You know, it's hardly changed in that time. But look at Tui here, has come around to be the second most abundant species. Blackbird slipped down. Caribou has moved up to fourth most abundant. So that's the sort of really cool stuff we start to see over a 5-minute bird count program that's been running for 20 odd years. So those are the sorts of time frames we're looking at. And that's just an annual sample, 135 sites, and 9 tracks, 15 sites per track that Kevin Parker and I have been doing since 1997. And the interesting thing too is that is just, we think, the effect of removing possums in, taking rats into consideration. There has been some bipedal rats, but the rats are pretty much prevalent through the forest over the states and the cats. Over most of it's just from removing possums, the benefits we see changes. So that's the sort of cool stuff you can pick up here. In mind and demonstrate, as I was saying before, the importance of trying, if we can, to improve the introduced birds in some. We do tell such interesting stories of what's going on. Essentially, what's happening is that we're getting indigenous dominance. Native birds are starting to dominate. And we've seen this graphically in places like Troy sanctuaries of native birds, especially in old endemics like Saturday, dominating now, and birds like silver eyes, fantails, and grey warblers, their numbers in some cases have even declined, as it's white-ears and robins and satyrs and so forth. They're dominating older endemics, making pest-free habitat. Do a lot better than introduced land with more recent native hybrids. And seeing the same stuff from there as well. So, yeah, something to look out for.
So there
we are.
For me, the kaka is one of the sort of species a lot of people would like to see.
Yeah, they're iconic, aren't they?
Would they? Do you think they would establish a colony and stay, or are they always migratory? I've always been under the impression that they're migratory.
That's the pattern we've seen so far, because what we've seen is in spring, they bail out from Great Barrier and Hotu, Little Barrier, and come onto the mainland. The young birds especially get hungry. I actually have a funny story. The ranger's wife took us out to the back of the garden at Little Barrier, at the back of the ranger's garden, said, come and see our ghost kaka. And this young kaka had been living in the garden and it got so hungry it died. And it was on its perch and it just sort of tilted forward. Its beak was resting on the next branch. There was a skeleton up in the tree sitting there like this. But a lot of them bail out and just come to the mainland. So they're the ones we're seeing around urban Auckland.
Yeah.
And we see them over the shore as well. And they're the ones, presumably, that have colonised the hunuas and are now breeding and becoming so abundant. Now they're using pest-free. And the same at Tawhanui. We do counts at Tawhanui in the mid-90s when we set up the sanctuary there. We were just in the sea kaka. But now there's this kaka sound all around us, they're breeding and doing really well and becoming numerous. So I think where there are pockets of good native bush with big tree holes, are there big pleury and dingle bell? I can't remember, with holes in them. The big old trees with holes in them. The kipper bush.
In the Karua Valley, I think
yeah.
There's one or two down in Battle Star Lake.
Yeah. So some of the coastal big courage around below the cliffs at Western Point around the back of the Plumpton Yacht Club and Ecologist Yacht Club probably would have big cavities in. The key thing is pest control. Yeah, so household cats are one, because one problem with kaka is the young birds leave the nest and then they spend the first week or 10 days living on the ground. They're also coming and going feeding on the ground. They're out of the hole, sitting there completely vomiting. So that's
the Tim's track for a kaka. Would they be attracted to a piece of apple and a Tim's track? Right?
Potentially. Yeah. So you need to nut out those. Although we do use Tim's traps at Tawhanui with it. I think we've caught the Tim's trap with it. We didn't know we had liquor at Tawhanui. There's one hanging in a Tim's trap. The Tim's trap is set in a tree and there's this hanging there like this. It presumably swung from Carlisle. Different swimming range.
I told you about the Hofstadter's frogs when they found them in a pitfall trap, and you're like, whoa.
Sometimes bird records tune up in the weirdest ways. Yeah.
Well, we are starting our 5-minute bird counts in October, so we do usually get quite a few people participate. In May, we had quite a few because of lockdown, so more people took part in it. So we'll count on all of you, hopefully, to help us with the 5-minute bird counts, so that we can start to tell those stories about what's happening in our area. It's one of the best ways to do that is with birds.
Yes, and some of them do respond quite quickly, especially during the period of graduating. And as I said before, in the longer period, you'll see those changes in the proportion of native communities, which is really starting to tell something for endemics and indigenous dominance.
Simon, any questions?
Yeah, in lockdown, I washed the windows of my house, and I had for the first time ever 3 silver eyes die flying into the window, and that had never happened before. And there had been huge flocks of silver eyes around. I forget what was flowering at the time.
There's a lesson there, Edward.
To late summer.
Don't wash your windows.
Yeah, but yeah, true. But I'm not going to do them again. but you talk to a lot of people, and you hear about kingfishers flying into their windows, and kirirus and whatever. Is there something that we can put on the windows to stop the bird strikes?
The one thing they did down Kapiti Island when I was working there, the ranger just put strips of masking tape about that far apart down that didn't work. So it's not, because the homestead had a balcony and at the end was a pane of glass, and the carrier and the carpet would cut the corner.
Yeah, exactly.
Slamming into the jolly glass.
It's sort of like design. It's like
Yeah.
it feels like it falls under the architects, how they design houses as well, and with glass. With a lot of glass these days.
Maybe if you put like little crystals, like hang the crystal down in it, so oftentimes CDs, deter birds from areas.
Mobiles.
Yeah, so something maybe that shiny or.
And the other option boxes.
Yeah.
But the other bird that's very prone to window strikes is caribou. And I came home one day and there was this hole in the window, and each hole in the window like this, and the pane of glass lying on the bed below it. What's happening here? And I picked up the pane of glass and just sort of the light bounced off me, this beautiful sort of impression of a spread-eagled caribou on the glass, with the dust that come out of the feathers, and that's a negative image of the bird. Yeah, so look out for that.
So it survived.
Presumably survived and flew out again. Yeah, it was amazing. My father had the same happen up at the farm a few years back, and I happened to arrive a few days later. He told me about it. I said, "Is it in the freezer?" He's trying to chuck it over the fence.
Is a wax eye the same as a silver eye?
Yeah, wax eye, white eye, silver eye, tohu. Yeah. Rosterops lateralis.
So it's like the Kakariki as well.
And Kakariki is the parakeets.
Native character.
That's one to look out for too. I didn't cover really, but they may start turning out as well because they're on green totem.
Yeah.
And have you?
Not many, but there is.
Have you seen them? Because they're quite strong flies, and they cross from show the Shakespeare, no trouble at all. So we Shakespeare. So
It's the red crowns.
And the red-crowned parakeet is really vulnerable to predators. It's quite interesting. On those islands, the field cats were quite spread. Cuvier comes to mind, and Brow Island. We had a combination of a browsing mammal and cats. We can't really wiped out. But where there's just cats, like Little Barrier, had many 400 years so. They still did well. The cats just couldn't hunt efficiently in the thick forest. It took the goats to open it up on Rail Island to enable the cats to hunt efficiently and catch and carpool or feeding on the ground. So these were the time feeding on food and seed on the ground.
That is something we're hoping to see. And I guess cockatoo always look out for your big trees, as we were talking, because they like to strip. They'll have their beak slashes.
Yes.
Down
Go to the
in
ecological
Rory.
Taifenui, the total trees have got big bare patches in the bark. You've got carpool stripping settling on, as you say, on the big pile right off, and you see stripes going around the boughs, right in the direction of the bough, as far apart. Quite distinctive stripes where the carpool and sapsucking.
That was always really apparent in the pine trees in Rory.
Yeah.
Do you ever see community groups monitoring Ruru at night time?
Not many actually. Well, as part of the consent for setting up the sanctuary at Shakespeare and Taifenui, we did more monitoring, and we just copied what Colin Muscallon, Rowan Empson had done Carpentry before we did what we did out. And so what we did at Tarford, we had 4 sites inside the park and 4 sites outside the park, and just basically planted a person there for 2 hours after dark, with a compass and a data sheet and just filled and a watch and just measured the calls. And we sort of drew rough maps. We described them as distant, near, and so forth, and tried to speculate they might be different periods. So sitting above a big sort of basin and bush, and might be another area. The prize of assuming really different territories interacting with each other. And so we did that to just to see if the poison drops had any effect, and we didn't find any significant effect from those. But that was the method we used, just sitting down and counting the calls and making the compass bearings in time. Like a kiwi.
Yeah, there is often a lot around.
There are, yeah.
One of my garden.
Yeah, like
I've got one.
I did one of mine down 2 weeks ago, all night from 7:30 at night, really early in the evening, and right through until 4 o'clock in the morning.
You do wonder about them too, and even if there's a shortage of tree holes where they're used to. If providing nest boxes might work. Years ago, there's actually a little article in my Tornus published in about 1960. These 2 boys out at King's College thought they'd make a Morpeth nest box and put it up in a big dark carpet tree, and the Morpeths nested in it for a couple of years. And when we were there, and a bit later on, there were miners in the box, unfortunately, because it had a large entrance hole and couldn't exclude the miners, so they'd taken it away. And the Morpeths were displaced by the miners.
Is it usually for the greenhouses and suburbies? I went to my garden aspect and couldn't figure out.
They like suburbia, actually. Yeah, and one of the favourite trees to nest in is actually oaks. And often if you walk into a big oak, the place to find plant on is about near the outer branch that come down and just hang, just release off the ground. And fantails love that sort of leafy overhead cover that used to be on the horizontal branch and right down the lower part of the oak. So, yeah, so they are common in the years. They do prefer sort of slightly more open habitat. We find with our Waitaku plants actually can run the ground. Yeah, they're actually really scarce and deep soil. So, yeah, quite.
Just go ahead and flip the corn.
Yeah, but we find them quite scarce. Waitaku, especially if the forest is dense. I like them.
Well, thank you so much, Tim, for coming. We got you some Saddleback wine with Pinot Noir.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. So yeah, keep a ear out, an eye out. If you're not on our Facebook page, I do try and post a lot there too, as well as with our newsletters. So hopefully you're able to see those things, and hopefully we'll see you next week to talk about bats. And I'll just post that location very soon as I get it. I'm trying to get this going. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.